I'd like to welcome councillors to this meeting of the BCP Council, and I'd also like to welcome the press and the public. Fellow councillors, thank you for your confidence in appointing me to this role as Chairman of the BCP Council for the ensuing year at May's annual general meeting of the full Council. I will endeavour to carry out the varying roles expected of the Chairman to the best of my ability and with energy and enthusiasm. It is an honour and a privilege to be entrusted with this role. I have already been honoured to attend civic engagements and will strive to represent the aims and values of BCP Council and the best interests of all the residents of all three towns in the BCP conurbation. In my role as a ward councillor, I find this guidance from the Local Government Association most useful. Councillors' primary role is to represent their ward and the people who live in it. Councillors provide a bridge between the community and the council. As well as being an advocate for your local residents and signposting them to the right people at the council, you will need to keep them informed about the issues that affect them. In order to understand and represent local views and priorities, you need to build strong relationships and encourage local people to make their views known and for them to engage with you and the council. Good communication and the engagement is central to being an effective councillor. To that end, it will be my constant endeavour to ensure full council meetings are assured of good communication. My desire is to maintain clarity of discussion and respect for all points of view as expressed across the floor. I will now set out the housekeeping arrangements for the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live and subsequent broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone follow these ground rules for speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand physically to indicate as such. Wired microphones have been provided. If a councillor wishes to speak and is not sat at a seat that has a wired microphone, a radio microphone will be provided. Councillors are requested to maintain social distancing and wear a mask or visor for the duration of the meeting and while in the BIC. When a councillor wishes to speak, they can remove their mask but must maintain social distancing and replace their mask when they have finished speaking. Hand sanitisers are also available and should be used as appropriate. Where there appears to be consensus in the meeting for a motion, I will ask if there is any dissension. When a formal vote is required, this will be carried out by a show of hands unless a recorded vote is requested, which requires support from a quarter of the members present at the meeting. Councillors are advised that the live stream of the meeting may include shots of councillors who are not speaking at that time. Evacuation details will be provided as appropriate by officers. Thank you. So, agenda item 1, apologies. Chief Executive, will you read out the apologies received for this meeting, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received today from Councillor Hazel Allen, Councillor Simon Bull, Councillor Mike Cox, Councillor Brian Dion, Councillor LJ Evans, who has asked me to explain that she's not attending in person due to current COVID legislation, Councillor Mike Green, Councillor Nicola Green, Councillor Marion Lepedevin, Councillor Chris Matthews, Councillor Mark Robson and Councillor Tony Trent.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Chief Executive, can you report on any declarations of interest received?
Thank you, Chairman. I understand that Councillor John Beasley has a disclosable pecuniary interest to declare in respect of item 6. Questions from councillors, and in particular the question on the Haven Hotel site. And I understand that Councillor Sean Gabriel has a disclosable pecuniary interest to declare in respect of item 7A, the recommendations from Cabinet on the 14th of April 2021, minute number 325 on management and development of leisure centres. In addition, Chairman, I understand that Councillor May Haynes wishes to make a declaration in respect of item 7A.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes. Yeah. I'm sorry. I beg your pardon, Councillor Beasley.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much, Chairman. It's in respect of the declaration that was read out a moment ago by the Chief Executive. I think I'd just like to explain that declaration for the avoidance of doubt for members of the public. So my declaration of interest at item 6 of the council meeting this evening in respect of a question from a councillor relating to the Haven Hotel at Sandbanks in Poole. Although I have no direct interest in the planning application for this site, the owners of the Haven Hotel are listed in the Council's Register of Councillors' Interests as clients of my consultancy, and as such I believe that I have such a pecuniary interest. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to note that any members declaring a pecuniary interest are advised to leave the meeting for the relevant item. If any members do leave for those items, then the officers will invite them to rejoin the meeting on the conclusion of that item. When members declare a local interest, then they can continue the meeting and vote.
Councillor Gabriel, I think you had your hand up.
I did. Thanks, Chair. It's regarding 7B. I was also involved in the development project for the SDP pitch at Rossmore, so I think I should declare that as well. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No other hands that I can see. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, do you agree to confirm the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 23rd of March 2021 and the annual council meeting held on the 11th of May 2021? Is there any dissension from confirming the minutes, please? There is no dissension. That's agreed, thank you. Agenda item 4, announcements and introductions. I'm very sorry to report the death of Don Collier, former councillor of the Borough of Poole. It's with sadness that I'm reporting the death of Don Collier, and I would call on Councillor Anne Stribley, who I understand wishes to say a few words. Councillor Stribley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many of you here today will have your own special memories of Don. I knew him first as a local politician, a fellow ward councillor, but over the years he became a true friend, advisor and confidant. Don was an interesting man of considerable intellect, and to the consternation of many of his political adversaries, he always did his homework. He knew the answer to that crucial question before it had ever been asked. We could all be here for hours if I began to describe some of the political escapades he often imagined might be worth a try. So I'll try to concentrate on the man he was. He would be hooting with laughter if I tried to say the person he was, in line with the ambitions of opposition colleagues in their endeavours to be totally gender neutral. Indeed, that issue was the prompt for one of the many telephone conversations we had only a few weeks ago, one of dozens we had over recent months and years. Don joined Poole Council in 1991 as a fellow Parkstone ward councillor, and throughout his time on the council we were always a real team. Of course we disagreed from time to time, but Don always managed to ensure we continued together, and more often than not, he got his way in the end. Whenever I thought I was right, Don knew he was right, and vice versa, of course. He was the epitome of an outstanding local councillor, and it was my good luck and pleasure and true privilege to work alongside him for 12 interesting years. He was selfless. Whatever he did, it was for the benefit of the residents of Parkstone in particular, or Poole as a whole. It was never for his own advantage or self-aggrandizement. He had integrity. Right or wrong, if he believed something was the right thing to do, he would ensure it got done. He had objectivity. he could usually see and understand the wider picture and not get bogged down in futile detail. He had accountability. He gladly took responsibility for all his actions and never tried to lay responsibility for any minor disaster upon anyone else. Don had openness. What you saw was what you got. He hated with a passion those mealy-mouthed individuals who tried to take credit when it was not theirs to take, and who would not take responsibility when it definitely was theirs. He had honesty, he was truthful to a fault, and would certainly tell it like it was. And he had leadership, a passionate and dedicated Conservative. When we regained control of Poole Council in 2003, Don became portfolio holder for the environment, an integral member of the Cabinet, then progressing to become deputy leader of the council. Don was responsible for many things we take for granted in Poole. The blue bins which helped keep Poole's recycling score so high, the rock groins which still keep the end of sandbanks from being scoured away and back into Poole Harbour, following disastrous advice from an Environment Agency expert. He was immensely proud to have been selected as an MEP candidate in the early 2000s. And he worked incredibly hard right across the southwest to ensure Conservatives got in as many MEPs as possible. Regrettably, due to the proportional vote in EU elections, he personally just missed out, though I'm sure we can all smile at the thought of Don stirring up Brussels. That I would have liked to see. However, around this time, Don's luck turned and he met Alex. At once it was clear that he'd met the love of his life. They settled down and went into business together, and Don was truly happier, kinder, gentler, but still caring so much about everyone, his community, his interests, his town. Only recently, during lockdown, two somewhat over-enthusiastic COVID compliance marshals were undertaking inspections of business premises. They visited Don's and Alex's tea shop, and when Don heard about their actions and their manner, he took up the matter with senior officers. It was just their bad luck that they had chosen to be overly Jobsworth with the business of a former councillor and portfolio holder for environmental services. Don was also snapped up by Conservative Central Office headquarters as a parliamentary candidate and just missed out on selection for a Southampton seat. Tragically, very shortly after that, he was diagnosed with cancer. Those of you who knew him will be able to imagine him ruefully laughing at these circumstances and using one of his favourite expressions. And he simply said, "Shit happens." As ever, Don was right, it does. But I'm grateful for knowing him, for having had a great colleague and a true friend, and for the many good memories he has left. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Stribley. I wasn't fortunate enough to know Don Collier, but certainly people that I've spoken to in the last week or so speak so highly of them. I'd actually like to request if members could stand for a minute's silence and respect, please. Thank you, members. Agenda item 5, public issues. A, public questions. In accordance with the Constitution, a public question has been received from Bob Hutchings. He is unable to attend the meeting and has asked if the question could be read out on his behalf. I'll now ask the Deputy Head of Democratic Services to read out the question, and I will then call on Councillor Mellor to respond to that question. Deputy Head of Democratic Services, thank you.
Many thanks, Chairman. The question from Mr Hutchings is, in appropriate circumstances, officers' reports to council and committees require a ward notification. Can you please agree to amend this practice so that the notification requirement includes parish councils as well as wards? Thank you.
And if I could call on Councillor Mellor to respond, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Mr Hutchins for his question, and will ask the Chairman of the Audit and Governance Committee if this matter can be referred to the Constitution Review Working Group for initial consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. B, statements. There are no statements submitted for this council meeting. C, petitions. There are no petitions submitted for this council meeting. Agenda item 6, questions from councillors. When a question has been answered, the councillor may ask a supplementary question which must relate to the initial answer. Councillor Howell, I understand you have a question to put to Councillor Broadhead on the Haven Hotel site.
Yes, thank you. The Haven Hotel is located on a key strategic site serving as a gateway to Poole. The hotel may be end of life, but the site should remain an attractive focal point with public access, with a high quality landmark building, or as a public park. The administration has advertised widely its intention to use council borrowing powers for regeneration and to promote tourism. Will it be seriously considering purchasing this site to ensure it remains emblematic of the ambitions and heritage of Poole, the wider conurbation and the council? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell, and I understand Councillor Broadhead, you will respond.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Ooh, it's very loud. And thank you, Councillor Howell, for your question. I would agree the Haven Hotel is indeed located on a strategic site serving as a gateway to Poole. However, it is not currently for sale and is currently subject to a live planning application for its future redevelopment. Through our asset investment panel, we consider opportunities to purchase strategic assets where there is a viable business case made to do so, in line with the relevant rules and regulations surrounding council investments and financing. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Andrews, I understand you have a question to put.
Excuse me, Chair.
I beg your
Have
pardon.
a supplementary. So sorry.
That's a help.
Just
Please
a quick
ask your
one.
supplementary paper.
Yes. Accepting to some degree what the portfolio holder says, would he not agree that the current planning application or series of applications that have been put are proposed to deliver what is a substandard building in terms of the ambitions and quality one would expect for such a landmark site, and therefore that might give reason for the council to reconsider? Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Howell, for your supplementary question. As I've mentioned, it is subject to a live planning application at the moment, so I think it would probably be inappropriate for me to comment any further on a live planning application, and indeed that would likely preclude any ability to try and purchase a site, because that would set a dangerous precedent for applications that we don't consider that we would personally like. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Andrews, I understand you have a question to put to Councillor Broadhead on the travellers' encampments.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. We are now getting unauthorised encampments in the BCP Council area. Wallisdown Recreation Ground, for example, 10 days ago. Without a travellers' transit site, this council's and the Dorset Police's ability to deal with these incursions is restricted. Can the portfolio holder, therefore, update councillors on this council's progress in identifying a suitable site to secure the opening of a traveller's transit site. In reply, would the portfolio holder agree that to leave the solution of opening and running a site to private enterprise would be a totally wrong step, being fraught with problems of not only identifying a site, but also its operation, and that a traveller's transit site needs to be owned and run by this council?
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Broadhead, respond, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Andrews for your question. I'm aware that there has been recent unauthorised encampments across the BCP Council area, and that the formal identification of an alternative stopping space will assist the Council and the police in the use of appropriate legislative powers. In terms of the Council's response, officers have commissioned a Gypsy and Travellers Accommodation Assessment, known as a GTAA, which once finished later on this year will provide an up-to-date position on the need for Gypsy and Traveller accommodation in our area. This will explore the requirements for transit sites and temporary stopping places that the local plan may then need to address through identification of any sites and related planning policies to determine planning applications. The Council are therefore not leaving this matter to private enterprise, but rather are looking at this issue at pace. However, any such applications that are submitted outside of the local plan process, such as the private application at present, will be determined through due process against the Council's existing policy framework. Any site that has ultimately been through the planning process will need to be managed by a relevant site manager that could be by the Council or a suitable alternative provider. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. You're indicating a supplementary question, Councillor.
Yes, thank you. Can the portfolio holder therefore ask that the relevant director ensures that additional officer time is found to identify suitable sites as soon as possible? Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
I'm delighted to confirm to Councillor Andrews that work is already underway, as I've explained, both through the Gypsy and Traveller Accommodation Assessment and the local plan process. Working closely with our colleagues in Dorset Council, I can confirm that that work is very much underway and will be done through the correct process as part of the assessment and the local plan. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Farquhar, I understand you have a question to put to Councillor Iyengar on visitors to BCP and issue of PCNs. Councillor Farquhar.
I do, thank you, Chair. My question relates to the questions which have been asked by residents on social media and the comments section on the Bournemouth Echo over the weekend of the 12th and 13th of June. It is asked in the spirit of being open and transparent to not only our successes, but also our shortfalls, and examining how our response to the impact of cars on day visits can be improved in preparation for the summer weekends ahead. Based on the BCP press release of Monday the 14th of April, where an estimated 400,000 people visited the BCP geography, a number which is actually greater than the population of BCP, what percentage of those 400,000 estimate is estimated or measured to have actually arrived by car? And of those cars, what percentage of the 810 PCNs, parking charge notices, issued address the actual number of cars that parked illegally? And what further steps will the local authority take to try and limit the impact of the number of cars coming in the future weekends? And why, since only one vehicle is reported to have been subject to tow away, what analysis will be applied to discover the principal reasons that tow away was only used once?
Councillor Iyengar, I understand you'll be replying to that.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Farquhar. I think there are 4 questions here, so I'll take each of them in turn. On the first point, we estimate 400,000 people on the seafront from footfall counters and a canvas of businesses, but a similar calculation can't be done with any accuracy for cars. The transportation team has counters on the major highways, but no distinction can be made between cars heading to the seafront, residents returning home, and others passing through the conurbation en route to somewhere else. Of those parked illegally, the question then from the councillor is what % were ticketed. We know 810 penalty charge notices were issued, but the number of illegally parked cars, of which that 810 is the % the councillor wants, that number of illegally parked cars can't practically be counted. From the last but one weekend, there's a growing understanding of where the biggest problems are and the side of the task. From this, we can get a better fix on the coverage of our ticketing, for instance. But for practical reasons, any estimate of road parking will be centred on the big locations and trouble spots for targeted action rather than a complete view across every location in BCP. The next question was about how to limit the impact of cars arriving. If the first response is to limit the number of cars, arguably in people's minds the most obvious first thing to do, let's keep in mind the importance of the tourism sector and 17,000 jobs locally. Equally, the fact that COVID-19 may have increased the use of cars, albeit temporarily, at the expense of public transport. Furthermore, it's a significant challenge for any local authority to voluntarily shut the major roads into a conurbation because of the statutory duty under the Traffic Management Act 2004 to operate an efficient highway network. Doing so would negatively impact the lives of most residents, something I'd hope the questioner himself would not advocate. Once cars are in the conurbation, arguably more can be done. Selective road closures can be considered where there's a build-up, and indeed, the councillor and all of us would have seen that this was done in Boscombe and in Sandbanks, and they were received positively by the residents in those neighbourhoods. The learning from those instances may be deployed further over the summer. Once again, practicality will be key so that good intent leads to actually better outcomes and not worse knock-on effects elsewhere. Ticketing can also be expanded. Although 810 PCNs on the weekend of 12th to 13th of June was already a huge increase on the numbers issued in the busiest days of 2020, there's room to go further. Members will know that the PCN charge is legally capped, and there has been debate as to whether it represents a deterrent. This point's noted, but ticketing is deployed nationally on a belief that it influences at least a good number of motorists, and we shall keep doing so until we have something better. Meanwhile, we'll expand it as one of our tactics and continue to lobby government to increase the charge limit. And as a last point within this part of the answer, One Park and Ride, as members will probably know, One Park and Ride is in operation in Kings Park to Boscombe, and a second one is due to come on stream in late July from Poole Civic to Sandbanks. The publicity, both offline, signage, and online through the app and elsewhere for both Park and Rides is intended to be raised going forward. Finally, on the last part of the councillor's question, on the towing, one vehicle was towed, but 5 others were ready to be towed, and didn't happen because the car owner raced back in time, so it would have been 6. Already this year, we've towed nearly 50% of the whole of last year's total, with summer barely about to start. But the tactic needs care because the civil enforcement officer is required to stay with the misparked vehicle until the tow truck arrives, time which could have been much better spent in ticketing other vehicles and performing other useful enforcement and helping duties. Nonetheless, tow capacity is intended to be increased, and with the intention to have the signage and vehicles more prominently there for a greater deterrent effect. Last of all, in summary, members, the councillor's question, and any councillor's question in this sphere, is welcomed as part of an open, transparent and constructive dialogue on our summer readiness. A dialogue that invites challenge and builds understanding across the chamber of the moving parts in this entire discussion and our ability to control them. In short, a dialogue which is in the best interests of residents, employees, businesses and visitors. This year, the readiness plans have been presented at 2 all-member seminars and have gone through overview and scrutiny committee, I might add, without a recommendation of dissent in any form coming forward. A huge number of questions have been answered via email, in the leaders' Facebook Live, on social media in general, and in press releases and in media articles. Members, we look forward to a constructive dialogue continuing going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iyengar. I assume there's no supplementary question.
If you please, Chair.
Oh, there is. Okay.
I very much appreciate the portfolio holder's answer and the accepting of the question in the way that it was actually meant to be received. On the subject matter of the limiting the impact of the number of cars, perhaps I should have been more clear in my original question. That was steered towards the park and ride. And since the portfolio holder did actually mention park and ride and expansion of the park and ride to a further one, perhaps the portfolio holder would like or care to say how many vehicles on that weekend of the 12th and 13th of June actually used the park and ride facilities, because I've received verbal reports that the bus service, the buses that were running down to Boscombe Pier, were predominantly empty. So if I may have a further question to that, how much did the company, how many bus tickets were actually sold on that weekend?
Councillor Farquhar, was that actually specifically on the response, the initial response, those questions?
It is. Park and ride was actually mentioned as limiting the impact. So I'd like to know how much the impact was actually measured on the park and ride. And since we're going to double the park and ride capacity, e.g., I believe I heard that it's going to be in the Poole direction, I think it's important information to have a baseline for how we can actually improve as a local authority.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Iyengar?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. I think with respect, I think I would have preferred this question is about figures. And actually, I think I can recall the figures. I know I've been told them, but quite at the moment, I don't have those figures to hand. And in a meeting like this, and for public record, I don't want to say what I think the figures were. And actually, if I think I'd pre-notification of this, I would have had the figures ready with me in some fullness to actually give you a complete answer to this. So I think this, let's take this away. I think the spirit of your question is around actually a greater use of park and ride, which I think I've covered in the first answer, and I think we're fully behind. And I think the particular point about how many were actually used at the weekend and so on, we can follow that up very quickly, because I think it came out in a previous communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iyengar. I'm sure you can assist Councillor Farquhar with more detail after the meeting. Thank you. Agenda item 7, recommendations from Cabinet and other committees. Council is asked to consider the recommendations, which will be taken separately as set out in the agenda. I would like to highlight there are decisions on some of these issues which have been taken under delegated powers by the relevant bodies and are therefore not before the Council. Item 7A, Cabinet 14th of April 2021, minute number 325, Management and Development of Leisure Centres. Relevant councillors remove themselves, yes. Councillor Iyengar? Yes, Councillor Iyengar, I understand that you will move the recommendations, and after that I will call on Councillor Mark Anderson to second the move. Councillor Iyengar?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Very pleased to bring item 7A forward. The recommendations are as in front of you, and well, let's see, but I hope non-contentious. The part A is a short-term extension to the company's sports leisure management, aka Everyone Active, that runs the 3 centres in Poole, the Dolphin Centre, Ashdown and Rossmore. And this was a contract that formally finished in June, literally the month we're in. And with COVID and other things, it was felt prudent to actually grant what is actually a 3-year, but with a break after 2 years, a short-term extension, therefore, which gives basically SLM time to, in a sense, start recouping some money in a more stable period, but also does not prejudice a longer-term discussion with them and with other partners about how we want to go forward with both our indoor and outdoor leisure. So I hope members can support this as a sort of a short-term prudent way forward. Part B on this is to support 2 specific projects of different sizes. One is in the very heavily used Rossmore Leisure Centre, and it's just round the back of it. The outside is the synthetic turf pitch, and rather costly, I'd agree, 1 million resurfacing of the whole thing. It's intensely used, as I hope many members here will know, and there's no question that in a sense what's charged for the teams to use the pitch and so on, it will be recouped. So I hope that can be supported. And a smaller investment is over the east side at the Two Rivers Meet, which is a even more synthetic sort of carpeted surface, which I had the pleasure of seeing just a few weeks ago. And that needs to be redone and will be done hopefully this December as well. Total cost, 1 million and 1.1. I think total's rounded 1.2 million through prudential borrowing and a few grants from the place. So I hope this can be supported, members. And as a final thing, I don't want to just push these through without adding that we have a number of other projects on the stocks across the conurbation, whether it be headline things like this, including Kings Park and so on, and also smaller things as well that may well be in the minds of ward councillors. And I look forward to bringing all of them together, whether or not they're worthy of full council consideration, but bringing all of them forward so that we're ensuring that we have this vision of sport as local to people as we can possibly get it. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to call on Councillor Mark Anderson to second the move.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, right. Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to second this paper. I think it's very useful, the work that's been done across the whole of the conurbation. I'm particularly pleased to see the work that's been done in Two Rivers Meet on replacing the carpet, and just shows our commitment to the entire conurbation. I don't think I really need to add much more after what Councillor Iyengar has said in such a large and very inclusive description of the work that's been done. So I just would like to second this and support it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Just at this juncture, I can't see everybody, but there was a scheduled reminder that everybody are actually wearing their masks at the moment, I understand. Is that confirmed? I've not been informed of any exemptions. Thank you. Open this up to the floor. Is anybody, the councillor with their hand up there? Sorry? Councillor Butler, I'm so sorry. Councillor Butler, please.
Thank you, Chairman. While I support Part A, Part B gives me a bit of worry, because reading the playing pitch strategy for 2020 to 33, it actually states that artificial turf pitches are actually higher cost in terms of maintenance and funds required for replacement. That's my worry with that one, especially the Rossmore Leisure Centre, which is already a grass pitch. If you look at grass, it's more sustainable environmentally, and also it would employ people keeping up the pitch as a grass pitch. So I feel that that should be stated, really. On top of the build cost, you've got to factor in the cost for future replacement, and this can be proven by the Two Rivers Meet Leisure Centre having to be replaced. Most people state that they only last about 10 years or so. So we've got to counter in that cost. So hopefully that might be considered to look at grass pitches as well as artificial turf, and especially in the case of the Rossmore Leisure Centre. Thank you.
Councillor Iyengar to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Particularly topical thing, by the way, just it's something else I was reading recently about artificial and natural grass. Just on this one, this does have the support very much of you can imagine a good deal of consultation was done on both projects, and especially the Rossmore one because of the size of it. And there is resounding support for this. And the one about, you are actually reminding me, the whole thing about replace the grass pitch versus an artificial pitch was discussed substantively, and it wasn't just glossed over at all. And with this one, I'm actually a natural fan of grass pitches, and frankly, I've got, I have to say, sort of a general sort of, let's keep grass pitches wherever we can, is my thing. In the playing pitches strategy, if I can maybe answer a question you've not actually asked, which is the writing on the wall for grass pitches right across the conurbation? Absolutely not. No. We're going to be keeping as many grass pitches as possible. But what comes with this particular one at Rossmore is there is a particular intense use of it, whereby actually through the discussion, the artificial pitch was actually seen to be the best way forward, in a sense because of durability, in the sense of the number of hours it can be used, the number of days it can be used. It's a tougher, hard-wearing thing for the kind of use that it gets. So I don't want to get more into the science of it because I'll start blinding myself with the science. But it was something that was looked into quite a lot, is the reassurance I want you to give. But the other reassurance is that grass pitches are going to be here for a long, long time around the conurbation, and certainly if I have any say on it.
Thank you, Councillor Igar. Anybody else would like to? Councillor Howell, please.
Thank you. Oh, take that off. Thanks, Councillor Inger, for that summary, which was very clear. The question I'd like to ask really is looking forward. I know it says in the paper in relation to strategy that that's going to come forward in separate papers, but I'm just concerned that obviously with COVID there has been quite substantial changes in the way that people exercise and the amount of people of exercise that people are doing, and I'm wondering how the council is going to get to grips with that. Essentially, what is because those changes will clearly inform the strategy that will be developed as the next stage of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. Councillor Igar.
Could I, just as a process point, Chairman, I probably made a mistake in answering, first of all, Councillor Butler's question. Is it normal that we take all questions or any speeches and I will sum up at the end?
It is your prerogative to sum up at the end, so...
Could I field all the questions and then answer them in one go? Is that okay, Chairman?
Yes, that makes total sense. Any other councillors would like to propose any further debate, questions? Looks like it's now your opportunity to sum up, Councillor Igar.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Howell. Just on the general point about COVID, point well made, and maybe there's an undertone there of kind of, is this sort of landing in the right place, team sports, etc., and close contact sports, if I've understood you right. We've got to be far-sighted about this. I don't want to say anything like COVID is disappearing next year. It's clearly not going to disappear. On the other hand, are we going to sort of strategically do anything in any way to not further the cause of team sports, contact sports that involve a lot of people at various levels as well, and of all ages as well, within reason? Absolutely, we're going to be supporting all of those things. And I think as a far-sighted conurbation, that's what we're going to be doing. So I think I'll take your question in, there's caveats now, there's some more caveats, there's some more considerations and maybe things we've got to now factor with because of COVID, but I don't think the general direction needs to change because of COVID that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Igar. With the debate an end on that one, could I ask for any dissent from these recommendations? None at all. Oh, Councillor Butler. I can't hear you, unfortunately. You're not mic'd. Is it my understanding you have one opportunity to speak at this juncture? Okay, yes. Could you state your dissension, if that's the case, Councillor Butler?
This is for the vote, yes? Yeah, I still am against Part B of 7A regarding the pitches. Yes, can you record? Thank you.
Masks and microphone. That's a challenge. Thank you, members. Item 7B, Cabinet, 14th of April 2021, minute 326, our museum, Poole Museum redevelopment project. Councillor Iyengar, I understand that you will move the recommendations and then I will call upon Councillor White to second the move. Councillor Iyengar.
Thank you again, Chairman. I've got a feeling I'm keeping everybody from the football. I'm very, very pleased to bring this to full council, as I was to bring it to Cabinet as well. and it's gone through considerable consultation in the various groups in the run-in to Cabinet, and it also went through overview and scrutiny as well, without recommendations from the meeting, and I'm delighted to say, if I heard the meeting right, with a good level of support as well. So I'm bringing it to Council this evening. Recommendation A is to approve the submission of the funding application to the National Lottery Heritage Fund. We're absolutely delighted with their support, their advocacy, not just for this, but for a range of things that we've been doing. And also, as Part B, approves the use of just over £1 million of new prudential borrowing in support of the Round 2 funding application. And for those of you who probably have done the maths on this, the total project, as you see there, is 4.2 million, just slightly more than that, which is the 1 million of prudential borrowing, and therefore the rest of it is made up of the grant, the prudential borrowing, and then a number of very, very kind and generous donors to the project. This is something, it will be absolutely transformational for not just Poole Museum, in terms of, we're not building wider, in terms of almost hollowing out and opening up, almost not quite doubling the space that's available to people for residents, for locally themed exhibitions, locally themed events, seminars, workshops and so on, but also as a magnet for some of the most illustrious, some of the most prestigious visiting exhibitions and displays, and why wouldn't they come to Poole? And it's a wonderful thing for us to be able to have there. The wider benefit is to that quarter of Poole, and should I say Poole in general. The Heritage Action Zone, there's a link to that, and to create that area as a cultural quarter, and I'm thinking here of the Cultural Compact, and of course as part of the wider transformation of Poole itself. This is absolutely the epicentre of something particularly big, and I'm delighted to be pushing this along. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Igar. Councillor White to second the move, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to second this. This is a really important project for Poole. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any members who'd like to contribute to this debate, please? Councillor Hadley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report and the investment in Poole Museum. It's an excellent facility. I was there yesterday looking at the animation exhibition, which brings the young Bournemouth University people in, and it's the breadth of appeal which this bid will extend in terms of making sure it's accessible by the public for all sorts of good purposes. We have 3 excellent museums in BCP, and I think we need to nurture all of them, and I think this is a really good investment, so right behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. I'll carry all the comments over so that the proposer can sum up at the end. Anybody else would like to contribute to this debate? Can't see any hands. Councillor Howell, please.
Thank you. Yes, I too would like to just reiterate that this is a fantastic project, and hopefully we will win the full amount of funding to be able to deliver it. But in both scenarios, it will be a fantastic improvement to what is already a great experience. My comment is just in relation to how terminology really, and how we're going to name these particular areas during the regeneration process in Poole, which hopefully will get underway soon. In somewhere in here, I can't quite find it, I think it does say that the museum is in the regeneration area. So historically, the regeneration area has been considered to be the area between both sides, between the bridges, essentially the area for regeneration, redevelopment, including the power station site. It also describes the area here as the Quay Quarter and Poole Quay Quarter, and the portfolio holder has referred to it as a cultural quarter. So I think going forward it would be really helpful for I think for us as councillors and also potential investors and partners if we could name particular zones according to their use and kind of stick to those names. Otherwise, it's just going to create a little bit of confusion, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell.
Anybody else would like to make any comments, contribute to the debate? Can't see any hands. So, Councillor Angar, if you'd like to sum up, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to acknowledge and thank Councillors Hadley and Howell for their comments. Just on Councillor Howell's thing, I agree in principle, yes, maybe some clarity around the zoning and the names. So I think, for instance, I just want to be careful, for instance, me leaping in and doing something like that. I think, I know from Councillor Howell's previous speeches on this subject, and I share the view, is that there's many people out there who feel passionate about the whole cultural development, not just of Poole, but at the broader conurbation. And I think it's worth just sort of waiting a little while, provided we don't lose anything, to make sure that how we decide these things resounds with people. And frankly, I'm not thinking of myself. I'm probably the least important person in this, but with people who are really invested in the area through either their longevity or what they create or what they do to perform and so on. And actually what matters to them is what we've actually got to work with. So that's the way I think we should judge it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Angar. If we can move to the vote now, please. If we do it by consensus, if there are any dissensions. I can't see any, so if we can accept that as accepted by consensus, please. Thank you. Item 7C, Cabinet, 14th of April 2021, minute number 328, housing scheme at Craven Court, Niverton Road, Bournemouth. Councillor Lawton, I understand that you will move on the recommendations and then I'll call upon Councillor Rampton to second the move. Councillor Lawton.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a BCP-owned site on Niverton Road, if anybody knows the area, next door to the Elstead Hotel. It's a 2 to 3 storey residential building with 18 flats. It's proposed for this building to be replaced, which has passed through planning board, and replaced with 24 apartments of 10 one-bed and 14 two-bed. This scheme was originally devised under the old Bournemouth and is now a BCP owned site. The proposal also, I'm pleased to say, includes passive house build standards. This will increase a very high thermal efficiency and excellent levels of air tightness. This will reduce our carbon emissions and also the reliance on expensive heating systems, and could reduce for the residents the energy bills by about 75%. It's an excellent scheme. It's an excellent addition to our housing stock to meet our housing needs, and I recommend its acceptance by the Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawton. Councillor Rampton to second the
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to second this and to provide 24 high-quality homes at affordable rent, adding to our housing stock and alleviating the pressure on our people waiting for housing on our council housing list. So delighted to second. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rampton. Any members like to contribute to this debate here? Councillor Brown. There's a first hand up. Councillor Brown for me. Can I call Councillor Filer Anne first? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This Craven Court's in the ward that I represent, and it's a perfect place to develop. At the moment, it has got 18 rather run-down flats. It's a rather run-down site. Very central, very near bus routes to everywhere, not far from the beach, and I'm sure this will be a great addition to our housing stock. And the fact that it's affordable in a perfect area for residential development, I'm very pleased to support this. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I welcome the proposal for affordable housing on the site and the improved energy efficiency within the proposal. I would just like to query the £5.3 million budget for the 24 one and two bedroom apartments, which comes in at about £220,000 per apartment. And when you read in the report under value for money, it does say in paragraph 47, the total scheme cost of 5.3 million is higher than what would be the market value once it's developed to 5 million. So we're borrowing money and we're spending all this money on the site, and actually then the value once we've developed it is actually less than we've spent on the site. And and that's not including, well, because it says land acquisition cost is zero, and later in the report it talks about the site value is valued at 1.36 million without planning permission. Now we're told it has planning permission, that would be even greater. So we're actually looking at a cost of, when you add in the land value that we're putting into the scheme, of somewhere between 280 and £300,000 for each 1 and 2 bedroom apartment. You know, that sort of money would buy a 2 or 3 bedroom family home with a driveway for parking and a garden in many parts of BCP, rather than just a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment where 24 apartments will have to fight over 9 parking spaces. I just wonder if the portfolio holder can comment on the value for money or the lack thereof.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Are there any more contributions to that debate? If I could then hand it to Councillor Lawton to reply to Councillor Brown and Summer, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Brown, for your question. Yes, on paper value, the scheme appears expensive, but I don't believe it is that expensive. If you remember, it is for senior living. It also is built to passive house standards, which are quite expensive to build, with triple glazing and the rest of it, the thermal insulation, etc., etc. So although you make the comment about it being expensive, I don't believe it is. It's a fantastic addition to the housing stock of BCP. It will add to the area, it will add to the enhanced living for the people who live there, and I still believe it's an excellent scheme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks to Councillor Lawton. If we could move to the vote on that, please, by consensus if possible, or is there anybody dissenting to this recommendation? Councillor Brown to abstain, if that could be recorded, please. And Councillor Butler against, if that could be recorded as well, please. Thank you, members. Item 7D, Standards Committee, 20th of April 2021, minute number 41, Local Government Association, Model Code of Conduct for Councillors. Councillor Barron, I understand that you will move the recommendations, and then I'll call on Councillor Brooks to second the move. Councillor
Yes.
Barron.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to move the recommendations as set out on the Council agenda relating to the Model Code of Conduct for Councillors, as recommended by the Standards Committee on the 20th of April 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barron. And Councillor Brooks to second the move, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased and delighted to support and second the recommendation as Vice Chair of the Standards Committee. It was in 1995 that Lord Nolan and his committee set down what we now know as the 7 Principles of Public Life, the Nolan Principles. 26 years ago, a lot has happened in that time. The internet was probably a thought, but now we have a lot in the internet, be it in terms of Twitter, social media, be it Facebook, and lots of other tools at our disposal. So it's quite interesting. In the role of councillors in all tiers of local government, it is vital that our country system of democracy is well supported. In voting for a local councillor, the public is imbuing that person and position with their trust. As such, it is important that as councillors we can all be held accountable and that we all adopt the behaviour and responsibilities associated with the rule. The conduct of an individual councillor affects the reputation of all councillors and this council. I'd like to say that in the application of the code, it makes it quite clear that we are now concerned about areas of communication and interaction, which not only include face-to-face meetings, online or telephone meetings, in written communication, in verbal communication, in non-verbal communication, and in a lot of respects in electronic and social media communication, posts, statements and comments. This is building on the 7 principles by introducing 15 best practice points that we as councillors should all follow. It's also worth noting that our monitoring officer has a statutory responsibility for the implementation of the code, and if you have any questions or need clarification, then I would encourage you to speak to our monitoring officer. So, Chairman, I'm very pleased that we can bring forward to Council for adoption a new code of conduct which will replace the code of conduct in section 6 of our Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Any members? Yes, Councillor Andrews, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Some of you might be curious about why we're inserting the word known. Well, the point about the word known was, at my suggestion, add it to paragraph 8b, actually it's sort of appendix B, which is on page 196 of your agenda tonight. Basically, paragraph 8b says at the moment, a financial interest of or well-being of a friend, relative or close associate. Well, Standards agreed with me that if left unqualified, it would place unreasonable, unfair obligation on the councillor beyond the legal requirements of the Localism Act. Having an obligation to declare interests of friends, relatives or close associates that are not known would be somewhat vague and lacks a reasonable framework for any councillor to conduct themselves within. Also, a friend, relative and close associate is not sufficiently defined within the model code. Basically, it's not clear. So the qualification was agreed at Standards. The insertion of the word known before the word financial in paragraph 8b. This would provide greater certainty and comfort for all. So many other councils have already adopted this code. You know, we should get on and approve it this evening. But many other councils have put in this extra word of known. For example, Leeds City Council, the second largest authority in the country. If left, it would allow a stream of complaints on hearsay claims and all end in a waste of time. So I would support the recommendation from Standards Committee to approve adopting the model code of the Local Government Association, but obviously as set out in your agenda with the insertion of the word known. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. I value the explanation we've just had for the word known, because I did wonder why we weren't following the model code as Dorset Council have unaltered. But I guess the issue that perhaps it would be great if could be taken back is at the very bottom of the model code. It does say it's going to be reviewed annually, and if we and other councils have felt it important to insert the word known, that we feed back that so that the next iteration of the model code can reflect that. I'm also interested and again grateful to Councillor Brooks for the piece around the use of the internet, and we are acting as councillors. That grey line between, I wasn't acting as a councillor, clearly if we're commenting on issues that are of relevance to this council, we need to be very careful, and I think that's something that we ought to be really cautious about in making comments, particularly on social media. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, Councillor Hadley. Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to add to this debate before I call on the proposer to sum up? Councillor Barron, if you could sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd be delighted to see this this go through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can move to the vote by consensus if possible. Is there anybody dissension or abstention? No. Thank you. The recommendation is accepted. Consensus. Thank you. Item 7E, Audit and Governance Committee, 22nd of April 2021, minute number 81. Report of the Constitution Review Working Group, changes to the Constitution. Councillor Beasley, I understand that you will move the recommendations, and after that I will call on Councillor Williams to second the move. Councillor Beasley.
And in moving the recommendation, I'll give to Council a little bit of background to this item. It was brought to us by the Chair of Licensing as a matter for us to consider, and the process is that the Constitution Review Working Group is where that consideration begins, and so the working group invited the Chair of Licensing to set out the principal reasons for making this change to the Constitution, which of course she did. The working group accepted that a committee of 15 councillors was in fact too large to consider specific licence applications, and particularly as meetings involved hearing and consideration of complex, sensitive and often highly emotive issues around suitability of applicants for licences. It was accepted that such a large group of 15 councillors could potentially be unfair and daunting to an applicant, probably an applicant who isn't used to presenting, certainly not to a group of people of that many. It was effectively the process of the subcommittee to be put in place to deal with a range of applications. The working party supported the expansion of the schedule of application types that could then be considered by the subcommittee. I should point out to Council that issues of strategy and policy such as licensing policy, fees and charges and so on would continue to be matters that should quite properly be addressed by the main licensing committee. The proposals put to the working group were therefore agreed, and to expand the list of licensing functions that could be discharged by a subcommittee, as opposed to having to go to the full licensing committee. This would include applications relating to premises or land operated by the council. The working group were very much of the view that the issue should be progressed as a matter of urgency ahead of a wider review of the Constitution, and the recommendation was made to Audit and Governance on the 22nd of April. That consideration was accepted, and it would have come to the council meeting on the 2nd of June, but of course, as we know, that was deferred until today's date. Therefore, Chairman, I move the recommendation, which is that the revised arrangements for the Licensing Committee within Part 3, Rule 3 of the BCP Council Constitution, as set out in Appendix 1 to the report of the Audit and Governance Committee, be approved and adopted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley. And to second, it's Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to second this. As chair of that constitutional steering group, we expedited it as quickly as we could, and it had the full support of the committee, the cross-party committee. So I'm very happy to second the motion. Thank you.
Any members like to contribute, make observations? Councillor Butt. The microphone is coming your way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had prepared a submission, but Councillor Beasley, as Chair of Audit and Governance, has been expansive and very detailed in his explanation of this rather delicate law. There's an absolute right for subcommittees to hear all matters and save those which he has outlined with regards to approving the level of fees charged by council and making decisions on the tariffs charged by public carriage trade. It would seem absolutely sensible, and I'm grateful that my arguments as put forward to the Constitutional Working Party, the Chairman, Councillor Williams, my thanks to him, and Audit and Governance, the Chair, Councillor John Beasley, be accepted. And that, as stated, the revised arrangements for the Licensing Committee within Part 3, Rule 3 of BCP Council Constitution, as set out in Appendix 1 of the report to the Audit and Governance Committee, be approved and adopted tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful to everybody involved in this process. Thank you.
Contributions from members, please. move to the vote, hopefully by consensus. Are there any dissensions or abstentions, please? Recommendations approved. Thank you. Agenda item 8, senior management appointments. Councillor Mellor, I understand that you wish to move the recommendations in the report, and Councillor Broadhead, I understand that you'll wish to second the recommendations in the report. Councillor Mellor, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'd just very much like to move this paper. I'll just remind councillors to why it's before us. Effectively, we've had some change in the senior team, including the loss of two corporate directors, Bill Cotton and Jan Fergus. Bill in February and Jan as recently as last week. That gives us an opportunity to look at the structure across the board and bring together a structure that was befitting of a council of this size. And we're very happy to be successfully appointed to those new roles. The recruitment process did include panel interviews with members of the administration and other non-administration members of the council, and each panel was unanimous in its support of the three candidates before us. So very happy to move them there. Chair, before I ask Councillor Broadhead to second, I would personally like to just pause for a moment to thank Jan Fergus, who left our service on Friday last week. Jan's an absolutely wonderful servant to local government through a very, very distinguished career, very much focused on the most vulnerable people, children and adults in our society, Chair. She delivered BCP Council and her service unit a safe landing as we transitioned into BCP Council, and that is absolutely no mean feat. And I know personally Jan was committed to spending those extra years of her career to make sure she left that safe landing, and she did a fantastic job in it. So she has been a servant to BCP, and most of all a servant to Poole, and many of us have known her for a number of years. She served Poole impeccably. She always gave absolutely wise counsel, calm leadership, and she will be missed. And I'd like to put my personal thanks to Jan on record, and I'm sure the rest of the council would like me to put the full council's thanks to her for her service and commitment to us, Chair. So very happy to move the proposal and call on Councillor Broadhead to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Merrill. I'm very pleased that commendation has been recorded at the full council. Thank you. Councillor Broadhead, I understand you wish to second recommendations in the report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm absolutely delighted to second these proposals, and very much welcome Kate Ryan, Phil Hornsby and David Vitti to their new roles, subject obviously to full council approval. As Councillor Mellor has pointed out, these were unanimous appointments. Each of the characters has displayed excellent skills, which I'm sure will take what is a huge opportunity we've got of the agenda in front of us to move forward and within their new roles. Chairman, I think it's also worth highlighting in the report a few other announcements within there. The Director of Public Health, confirmation of Sam Crow, Director of Communication and Marketing, which is Georgia Turner, Bridget West as Head of Policy and Research, and the new Interim Director of Delivery, David Anderson, as well, which is all complementing a very different looking front team that will be leading the council forward. We've got some big plans, and it's very exciting to see such heavyweights in these positions, and look forward to working with them closely in the future. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Any members like to contribute observations? Councillor Debman.
Sorry, so thank you, Chairman. I wasn't quite ready there. Yes, you might remember that I was the Adult Social Care and Health Cabinet member at the start of the council. So I'd really like to echo the words of the leader in his praise for Jan Thurgood. And in fact, I must say the whole department do a great job. So I'm talking about the Adult Social Care and Health reorganisation. And in paragraph 5, it says we must reduce costs where we can. And can I just say, and I think I've said this to the leader and he knows my feelings on it, that reducing costs must not mean any reduction in services to our vulnerable residents. I totally applaud the aim of the Centre of Excellence, which we've been working towards since the start of BCP. and I certainly applaud the aim to continue and expand work with all our partners. But the only point I really wanted to make, Chairman, and I'm sure it will be taken on board, is that any cost reduction, any staff reorganisation mustn't reduce any services. These are our vulnerable residents and we owe them a duty of care. But I certainly applaud the reorganisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dedman. Any other members want to contribute to this? No? Okay, can I call on Councillor Merritt to sum up, please? Thank you very much, Chair. And can I also thank Councillor Dedman for joining me in thoughts around Jan Ferngud. Councillor Dedman and I did discuss this matter at overview and scrutiny, and I'm really glad to repeat part of my answer. It's about efficiency of cost has to be our aspiration, but the ambition for outcomes is very much there and needs to supersede that. Very proud that this administration has a really strong record of investment in adult social care, putting an extra £13.5 million in our last budget and a number of other service investments as well. So absolutely appreciate the spirit of the comment, and very happy to move to a vote on this paper, Chair. Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Mellor. And so if we can move to the vote, hopefully by consensus. Are there any dissensions or abstentions, please? No. Recommendations accepted. Consensus, thank you. Agenda item 9, notice of motions in accordance with procedure 12. Councillor Burton, I call upon you to move your motion as set out in agenda item 9. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. The crux of this motion is to assist this council to provide the correct number and type of houses for our residents. It doesn't seek to be anti-development, obviously we need houses. Currently the number is imposed on us. We need to ensure that the number that we are building is correct. At present it's based on the standard method using 2014 numbers of population growth with addition of an arbitrary uplift to make for the historic shortfall in numbers. A lot has changed since 2014. There's little consideration for the special nature, and I think we can all appreciate the special nature of BCP. We've got sea to the south, we've got a wide but thin authority with development on our borders from our neighbouring authorities, and we've got the importance of our conservation areas, our SSSIs, internationally important and rare habitat. The imposed number forces us to put huge pressure on our green belt and other open spaces and the character of our towns, but doesn't ensure that the correct houses are being actually built. The Office of National Statistics has questioned the use of the 2014 data. Their 2018 data shows substantial differences. Many councils see an 80% reduction whilst others see an increase. For BCP, the number changes from 2,701 to 1,011. The government's planning practice guidance on housing needs says that we can use an alternative approach if we can justify diverting from the standard method. If we continue to use the out-of-date method, we risk forcing a vast number of unnecessary homes on our population, primarily built on what is currently greenbelt land. The second issue is that when developers are granted the planning permission, there is no urgency placed to deliver completed houses. The recent planning system white paper doesn't address this and also generates issues for BCP in delivering the correct houses for our residents. The Housing Communities and Local Government Committee, which is appointed by the House of Commons, also has concerns here. They say to meet the government housing unit target, there is a need to speed up the delivery of housing. The problem of build-out rates needs to be tackled with a mixture of carrot and stick needed to achieve this. We at present have no control on when these houses are delivered and the council tax income that could be spent on infrastructure and services to the benefit of our residents. They can simply become an investment for distant developers and the aspirations of our local plan and planning committee undermined and then become out of date. Out-of-date data and the date permissions delivering something that we may not then need. So I encourage everybody to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Councillor Brown, I understand you wish to second the motion.
Yes, I'm happy to second. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. We won't need to time that one.
I'll speak. I withdraw hold my right to speak later.
I understand. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, genuinely thank you to Councillor Burton for bringing this motion forward. There are other things going on tonight, so I'm going to make this extremely easy, because a lot of this motion is directed to me as a portfolio holder to do stuff. And I'm going to completely agree with almost every word that Councillor Burton has said this evening, along with what has been put forward within this motion. We do have some serious challenges with the formulation of a local plan, and indeed it's been well rehearsed, the issues with the current standard methodology, which the government are very insistent that we have to use. And there are a number of issues with that. The Council has previously written to the Secretary of State on this basis, and I'm delighted to announce that I'm actually already, only in the last month, again written to the Secretary of State to do exactly what this motion is asking to do, challenges the standard methodology, to urge the government to use more recent data in their calculations. What I'd actually like to do, and I sincerely hope to get hopefully Councillor Burton to second me in this, is to actually go a little bit further and to put an amendment forward which talks about the additional work which we're going to be doing to try and tackle this point with government going forward. Because in addition to what we're talking about with the standard method, we actually, the planning team, have been working on a really good piece of work at the moment using the recent statistics authority findings of the ONS report, looking at some of the demographic inaccuracies or difficulties even within the standard methodology itself, which shows that certain areas, such as areas with a big student population, for instance, such as Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, are quite misrepresented in those figures. Now, we think we've got a very good case on this. I actually had a conversation with the Secretary of State last Friday, and we are pushing this forward in conjunction with a number of other councils. So I would actually like to do two things and put an amendment forward. First of all, acknowledge that instead of asking me to write as a portfolio holder to the Secretary of State, to acknowledge that I have done that. So I've just changed the first two bullet points to say the same thing, but acknowledge that I have already written and underlined that message to the Secretary of State. But to add a bullet point, and it's a bit bizarre for me to put an amendment forward asking me to do something, but I think in the spirit of what we're trying to do here, and I have just sent this round to all councillors to add an additional point to call on the portfolio holder, that's me, to go even further and write to the Secretary of State once the work stream around challenging the demographic assumptions embedded in the 2014 projections as a result of the recent statistics authority findings in respect of a complaint to the ONS are complete. The aim of that, Mr. Chairman, is to completely take on board Councillor Burton. Indeed, all of our points in that we want to move our area forward. We want to provide housing for our people, but it has to be based on the right data, but to urge to go even further and to use that emerging data to build on that with a further letter. So I'd like to put that forward as an additional amendment, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would hope that Councillor Burton may second.
Thank you. Councillor Burton, you have the opportunity to second Councillor
Yes,
Broadhead's
I'm
amendment.
more than happy to second that. I'm never going to suggest that somebody does less work, and when you're offering to do more, I'm very grateful.
Thank you very much. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I speak in favour of the amended motion, perhaps, yeah. As regards to three matters which the portfolio had been asked initially to raise, we obviously have the concerns about the 2014 figures. Well, I'm aware there are some 2016 ones that could have been used. Strangely, the 2014 ones that used the data all the way back to 1971 census up to the 2011 one, as adjusted, are said to be better. Well, we now have the 2021 census. It's complete. Surely that information should be made available to local authorities and government departments as soon as possible to update the targets. On the second matter, lobbying our MPs to compel developers to get on and complete residential schemes, well, in the ideal world, that would be fantastic. It would mean the process of providing new homes would be speeded up, but the detail is of this worthy principle could see complications, such as the applicant not actually owning the land, the existence of restrictive covenants, and because many sites need decontamination, that can all cause delay. But having mentioned those issues, we should be aware that the Parliamentary Select Committee of the Communities and Local Government have in fact called for the building works to start within 18 months of the consent being given, and within another 18 months for the dwellings to be complete, saying that if not done, full council tax will be payable for every home incomplete. The third bullet point calls on our officers to proceed with the strategic housing market needs assessment, so we can work together with our neighbours to identify what forms of residential development are needed. Indeed, linked with that are concerns that the planning white paper dilutes powers of locally elected representatives to decide on residential development schemes. Only last week, we saw how one community, Chesham and Amersham, sent their message on these proposals loud and clear. Commenting on the by-election result was Tory peer Baron Hayward, a well-known commentator on political facts and figures. He is quoted in The Guardian as saying, "It's clear that there will now be a marked impact on Robert Jenrick's intended planning legislation." Well, he should know about protest votes, wouldn't he? As plain Rob Hayward, he stood at the 1993 Christchurch parliamentary by-election. He lost very badly. There was a record 35.4% swing against the Conservatives, far better than last week's 25.2%. So the message is clear. The government needs to work with local authorities and communities, not against them. The planning reforms need a complete rethink. The motion should be supported and the message is sent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. I had two indications of councillors who wanted to contribute to this debate. I think Councillor Phipps, I think, was the first, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was going to speak on the motion, but we've now got the amendment, which actually I do welcome. Thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead. I think you already know my feelings on this from being on the working party. I am very much aware, as we all are, that the NPPF says that we should use these 2014 figures, and I'm grateful that you're actually going to write to the Secretary of State and basically challenge them. However, if they do come back for any reason and say, sorry, but that's not happening, I really do think that we should be looking for exceptional circumstances, which the NPPF basically says we can do. We can justify an alternative approach if they still insist on these 2014 figures. It's also clear that the starting point for all of this is a housing needs assessment, and it's got to be based on realistic assumptions, which the 2014 figures are not. And that assessment will underpin the local plan. It's basically its foundation. The difference, as has been pointed out by another speaker, in the projected population figures for 2014 and 2018 is absolutely stark. I mean, the 2018 figures, even with the affordability factor in, are only about 16,000 homes for BCP, and that's over the planned period from 22 to 38. But if you use the 2014 statistics, which are wildly out of date, we're looking at about nearly 43,000 homes. So even if you were to double the 2018 figure up to 32,000, it's obvious, isn't it, something is seriously wrong with these 2014 figures and the methodology, which do not reflect the future demographic needs of this area. If we were to use these 2014 figures, we could be planning for homes which we don't require. It would have huge consequences for our three towns: increased urban densities, higher buildings, possible development in conservation areas, loss of greenbelt. Not to mention we haven't got the infrastructure, roads, doctors, schools. And any local plan would be compromised. It would be based on fictitious need, and the council would basically be setting itself up to fail the housing delivery test. So if the government doesn't change its mind, I believe there is justification for exceptional circumstances to be looked at as well, and I'd like to see that happen. We do need a credible housing needs assessment based on realistic data. We just cannot proceed straight down the road with these 2014 figures, so thank you very much for saying that you will challenge them. Thank you, Chairman. I support that.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. Councillor Slade, please.
Thank you, Chair.
And I won't waste time talking about the bits that we were hoping that the portfolio holder would do, because we now know he's going to do it, and I'm really grateful for that. I do want to focus on the other part of the motion, which is relating to the incentives and penalties that we would really like you to continue to stress that needs to be worked on. And I would encourage all members to read the Select Committee report that was issued a couple of weeks ago on the planning paper, which does criticise the government quite heavily for its simplistic approach. It specifically calls for the system of incentives and penalties, one of which is the council tax idea, but another one which was raised only yesterday by the Conservative MP for the Isle of Wight, Bob Seeley, that suggested a tax on greenfield development and additional measures to support councils buying empty homes in its area. The Centre for Policy Studies recently wrote that planning permissions need to move from being an option to develop to a contract to build. And I think that's a really good point to make to the MPs and to the Secretary of State next time Councillor Broadhead has the opportunity for the discussion. I'm pleased that everyone is looking to support this. I think it's really important that we have the opportunity where developers are asked to use their permissions, not just as a means of inflating land value for its own sake. And if the portfolio holder would like a little nugget to take with him for his next conversation. Oh, I must just say, I was disappointed when I listened to that debate yesterday that not a single BCP member of Parliament spoke up about the importance of local involvement. There were many MPs from the Conservative benches, and it would be great to see some of those that represent our residents speak up on this matter. But finally, I just want to say, if the government believes in data, not dates, as they have made very clear over the last year, we should be calling them out when they try to make us use out-of-date population data instead of locally derived data. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Slater. I think Councillor Farquhar was next. Councillor Farquhar, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll keep it fairly brief. I can't support this amendment simply because the original motion actually does call upon this council to alert government that to allow developers to continue without any sanctions or incentivising to actually fulfil their commitments and continue a model of land banking or property banking and not building to the requirement for our housing needs. I think reading through Councillor Broadhead's amendment whereby the bullet point, all of that disappears and it simply asks to ask the planning officers to continue to proceed with haste with the strategic housing market needs and assessment. Whereas the original motion actually calls upon the portfolio holder to write to our MPs, and having listened to Councillor Slade, whereby none of our MPs that represent our geographical area actually spoke to the paper itself, I think our voice isn't being heard, so I cannot support the amendment as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Councillor Hadley, I understand you indicated, please.
Thank you, Chair. Some of what I was going to say has been covered actually, but I think the key thing for me is that the commencement. So there's this bit about developers either just speculating on the value of the land or just sitting on undeveloped sites, and that's particularly true in the redevelopment area. We as a council spent a huge amount of money on Twin Sails Bridge to unlock that development, and it's been years and years without action. So obviously we've had to step in as council. But trying to make sure that we don't just get holiday homes, holiday second homes, and the impact that has on our infrastructure, both in terms of congestion we heard about from the question earlier tonight, but also from things like sewerage, which it seems is now not even coping in the summertime, let alone in the depths of winter. So we really need to make sure that the infrastructure investment matches the developments that take place, and that we're supporting our existing residents as well as new residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Brown, I know you reserve the right to speak, but Councillor Wilson, would you like to reserve your right to speak at the end? And if I call Councillor Wilson before you?
Is that acceptable? Councillor Wilson, please.
Cheers, thanks. Yeah, thank you. I really welcome the amendment brought forward, but I would just like to ask if the amendment that has been brought forward has any effect on the 15,000 homes that are due to be delivered over the next 5 years, which obviously is a rate of 3,000 per year, and that's 400 higher than the current target. So I just wondered if that had an effect. You can obviously answer that in your summing up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Howell, I think you indicated.
Thank you. It's just an observation, really, in on the radio and TV recently, in recent days, there's been a lot of talk from particularly hospitality operators who are desperate because they can't find enough staff because they seem to feel that many more people than expected have returned to the EU, and you know, going forward, this could have a major impact on where people wish to live in this country, and it's also very important in terms of thinking about how we restructure our local economies. So, going back to the point of the role of our MPs, I would hope that, you know, they are representing our interest in that respect, and that element of the debate will be fleshed out. With regard to the actual motion, I agree with it, but the second bullet point is somewhat wordy and difficult to understand, and I think that's partly because I think the words "are" second from the end should be "is," because it relates to work stream is complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. With Councillor Brown's continuing indulgence, if I may, there's another...
The position in Christchurch is quite interesting because we have 1,210 homes with consent, but no development started. A week last Friday, I attended a presentation with the developers, Taylor Wimpey, who are proposing to build 875 homes with outline consent, which is the Christchurch Urban Extension, which Christchurch independent members here know very well, which is behind Sainsbury's and the Stewart's Garden Centre. Now, going through the presentation with them, it was quite interesting how complex putting a development together of that magnitude takes. It does involve relocating high-tension cables north of a railway line. It's just an indication. Sang matters as well. And so the list goes on. So they, to get full planning consent, will be working from this autumn with 4 separate applications, which will come to, I'm sure, committee, to progress that scheme. And I think it is for our officers and perhaps members to engage with developers to understand the complexities and the hoops they have to go through to actually get a development starting. They were given consent outline in 2017, 18, and it just shows how long it's taking to bring a development forward. So I would commend our officers to work with developers to actually get these schemes started. And there are 4 of them across the whole of the Christchurch area, which I'm sure members would be delighted to see start. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. So if I can now call Councillor Brown, who was the original seconder who reserved the right to speak. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I won't actually speak too long because I welcome what the portfolio holder's statement and sort of agreeing with a lot of the points raised in the motion. I'll just seek a bit of clarification on the point raised by Councillor Farquhar about the second bullet point there within the motion. So I'd like some clarification on that so that I can support it. Obviously, members are aware that getting this number to be reliable is difficult because it's all forecasting, but it is critical for BCP Council and our residents. It's critical for my ward. There are multiple major developments either being built out at the moment, have been approved, or in the pipeline that have been proposed, totaling almost 2,000 new homes in the ward that Councillor Burton, Councillor Andrews and myself represent. House building numbers impact on our highway and public transport investment, on our school provision, on our waste management, on our street services, not to mention the impact on the established communities in BCP. I'd hope that with the correspondence from the portfolio holder to the Secretary of State, that the Secretary of State and the government are now even more receptive to this, as I believe that they are aware of the public sensitivity about development, about the retention of green spaces for communities, so I hope that they've got open ears to the messages being passed from BCP. I won't speak any longer because there are important goals going on around the country, so I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. No other members, so I'd like to call upon the original mover of the amendment, Councillor Broadhead, to respond, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll just cover a few of the points that have been raised during the discussion. First of all, to Councillor Farquhar, he talked about the abandonment of that particular work stream around recognising the completed and not just commenced sites. I haven't abandoned that. I've rolled that into one a bullet point, which is the first one, but to give further assurance to all members, when I write the second letter shortly at the final point of the other work stream that we've got going on, I will reiterate at that point, because I do think that that is a very important point. To address Councillor Wilson's point, the current figure that we're working toward on the standard method is around 2,700. Now, this isn't just about arbitrarily trying to get the figure down because we don't like the look of it. It's just trying to ensure that the figure, as I think Councillor Brown said, is fair and balanced, but representative of the actual need that we have in house building in the future, because I'd said at my opening, it is important that we build homes. So in summary, Chairman, my job as portfolio holder is to launch what I consider to be a two-pronged approach. Number one, to challenge those 2014 figures, full stop, and to say that we do not think they're representative of where the world is today. Number two, in recognition of the fact that government is very wedded to those, to challenge the actual figures within the 2014 standard methodology and make sure that they fairly represent the demographic here. But then there's a final point in that we cannot shirk our responsibility to prepare a full and balanced local plan if that is not successful. I won't shirk my responsibilities. I'm really enjoying working with the local plan working group, and no matter what happens, I'm sure that we'll be able to get through this together, protect our green belt, and build the homes that are necessary for the future. So thank you for the cross-party support for this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. So finally, I'd like to ask the mover of the original motion, Councillor Burton, to reply to the debate on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, to be honest, there's nothing much more that I need to say at this point. I think we've had a good debate and there's some good points come there, and I'm very grateful to the portfolio holder for supporting my original motion and for the additions to it.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. So I think we can move to a vote on this motion now, please. If it's not going to be consensus, would we move to... Yeah. As amended, beg your pardon, yes. If we could move to the vote on the motion as amended. Would we propose to a show of hands? Okay, well, can we ask if there's any dissensions or abstentions, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Farquhar, I am against, and I would like it recorded for the minutes, please. And that is the motion as amended.
Certainly will be recorded, thank you. Councillor Butler? Did Councillor Broadhead, did you send it round? You have it in your laptop, Councillor Butler. It has been emailed, yeah. I mean, that's accepted as being in writing.
Chair, I'm happy to read the bullet points if that it will take 30 seconds.
Yes, that would
Sure.
help for clarity.
So the amended motion is to acknowledge that the portfolio holder has written to the Secretary of State, once again making the case to government to use more recent data in their calculations rather than the outdated 2014 numbers, along with urging greater work to recognise sites to be completed, not just commenced. Secondly, to ask the planning officers to continue to proceed with haste with the strategic housing market needs assessment to enable us to work with our neighbouring authorities in a timely manner to fulfil any unmet needs. And then finally, and I will accept the grammatical error that I put in earlier, Councillor Howell correctly pointed out, to call on the portfolio holder to go even further and write to the Secretary of State once the work stream around challenging the demographic assumptions embedded in the 2014 projections as a result of the recent Statistics Authority findings in respect of a complaint to the ONS is complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. So we can move to the vote, please. Any dissensions or abstentions, please? We have one dissension from Councillor Farquhar. Any more to be recorded? That's it, that's accepted. Thank you very much. Thank you for that excellent debate. Which takes us to agenda item 10, urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with the Constitution. There are no urgent decisions to be taken by the Chief Executive to report to the Council. Which brings us to the date of the next meeting. There is a proposal, and this has been run by various groups and leaders, to defer the next Council meeting, which was due on the 13th of July. So it needs to be agreed by Council that the proposal is to defer the next full Council meeting to September, 14th of September, which was actually the next scheduled date of a Council meeting in your diaries. Could we have a show of hands on the acceptance of the moving to that one, please? I think it's fairly unanimous. That's a majority. Thank you very much, members. I know you're all going to be very disappointed in this, but that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for your contributions. Have a safe journey home.